Hello and welcome to episode 1 of how to make a game. In this episode we will set up the project, make a player and make a movement C# script. In the last episode we covered the Unity editor basics. If you don't know nothing about Unity, so go watch it and come back to this video. First let's make a ground, right click in the hierarchy to the sprites and make a square. Move it down, scale it to cover all the camera. And let's make it kind of blackish red. Now let's add a box collider to the ground so we can collide with it. Make sure to choose the 2D collider. And now let's create a layer for this ground so we know what is ground and what is not a ground. To create it, just click here and then make sure to choose the layer. Now let's create our player. For now it's just another sprite, but it's white. Let's give it a box collider 2D and a rigid body so it will have physics. Let's drag the game view here so we can see what's happening. Let's change the background color of the camera because it's too ugly. Now if we hit play, the gravity will drag our player down and it will collide with the ground. Let's create a folder, call it scripts, and all scripts will be held here. Let's create a C# script and call it player controller. You can call it whatever you want, but I like to call it player controller. Inside the script you will see two built-in functions made by Unity, one called void start and second one called void update. Any code you type in start function will run only one time when the game starts, and the codes that you write in update will run every frame. So if you have 10 frames, the code will run 10 times per second. Let's go up before the start function and let's make a public float and call it speed. Let's make another float and call it move direction. Floats are just numbers and I make the first one public so I can change the speed from the inspector. Let's make a reference for the rigid body that we created. We call it RB. And then let's call it in the start function so Unity will know what is RB, because there is many rigid body in the game, so we tell it it's the rigid body of that component, so of the player. Let's go to update and make our move direction. So we type in move direction equal input.getAxis and we type horizontal. This will return -1 if we move left and 1 when we move right. Now let's create the function that will move the player. I call it move player. Inside the function we type rb.velocity equal to a new vector 2, and inside the parentheses we type move direction, we multiply it by speed and multiply it by time dot delta time, and in the y we type rb.velocity.y. rb is our rigid body, so we get its velocity and we move it by the move direction, and we multiply it by speed, because move direction will be only 1 or -1. If it is -1, we move to the left by 1 unit, so it's very slow. That's why we multiply it by speed, and then we multiply it by time dot delta time, so the frames will not affect it. Because if we don't do that, if you have like 300 frames, you will move so fast, but if you have 20 frames, you will move too slow. And in the y we just type rb.velocity.y, because we don't want to move the player in the vertical space, only in the x-axis, which means horizontally. Now let's call the function in the fixed update. We type in fixed update and the function name. Every time we deal with physics, we call the function in fixed update. In this case we have rigid body, so we are moving the player based on physics. That's why we use fixed update. So let's recap. First we declare the speed and the move direction and the rigid body and call it RB, and define it in the start function, and define the move direction in the update function. So Unity will check every frame if I move left or right. So if we pressed A or D, so it will give us a value of -1 or 1 for the move direction, and made the move player function that will handle the movement logic, and we called in fixed update because we are dealing with physics. So that's all for the scripts. Let's go back to Unity. Before that, press Ctrl S to save your script, or nothing will work. Select the player and drag this script to the player. We see that we have a speed value. Let's try something like 5 and play. And the player is moving a little bit too much slow, so let's try 200. And yeah, now we can move left and right. But you might notice we have a small problem here. The player is not moving just when we're clicking. In some games it's fine, but in most platformers you don't want that. So go back to your script and type in get axis raw. When we already type get axis, so now get axis raw. This should fix the problem. Let's back to Unity. Let's change the speed to 300 this time, maximize on play, and let's try. And yeah, now it works fine. So this is the end of the video. Thank you guys for watching. In the next video we will handle the jump, and see you next time.